talk a little bit about this strong man. Trump, his people, one more, they just got shot down again today in Wisconsin. They're filing another lawsuit to throw out ballots in New Mexico because of the drop boxes. What is happening here? And how does history play a part in what Trump is attempting to do to hold on to power?
Karen, I wrote Don't Know Much About History 30 years ago. We've been talking about it for almost that long. And for most of that time, I was a fairly optimistic person, thinking that the country's moving forward, we're progressing. We saw the end of communism in the 1990s. The Soviet Union fell, the Berlin Wall came down, apartheid ended in South Africa. We thought this was a new era in world history where democracy and progress and freedom and human rights would flourish. That lasted about 10 years. Now, for most of the last 20 years, we've gone backwards, and we've gone backwards around the world, but we've also gone backwards in this country. So I have been as pessimistic as I have ever been about democracy in America in the past 5 or 6 years. And the things that have happened actually are my worst nightmares, but exceed my worst nightmares. We actually have seen what I would call, and others have called, a coup. It's a nonviolent coup in the sense that there are no tanks in the street, but it certainly started to get violent over the weekend. And we've seen sporadic violence around the country. So this reminds me very clearly in history of what happened in Italy in the 1920s, and then Germany in the 1930s, when Mussolini's brown shirts took over in Italy, the fascist party, and then Hitler's the black shirts in Italy, and then the brown shirts modeled on the black shirts in Germany. So this is a very, very real story that has a lot to do with our times. In Strongman, I write about 5 dictators, including Hitler and Mussolini, who took over in democracies. They did not come into countries that had no democracy at the head of a tank. They took over, they were put into positions of power by men, some foolish men who thought they would be able to control a Mussolini or a Hitler. And quickly, these 2 democracies turned into autocratic one-party states with, of course, murderous results for all of history. So it's a really important piece of not that long ago that we should understand. I've actually been watching to some degree what happened in Washington, D.C. over the weekend. And I can only tell you that the only thoughts I've had were, this looks like what Italy looked like in the early 1920s and what Germany looked like in the 1930s, when armed and, in those cases, uniformed men were beating people on the streets, burning or destroying synagogues. We saw churches attacked, assaulted, Black churches in Washington, D.C. attacked because they had Black Lives Matter banners hanging. I've seen these sickening sights of people being pummeled on the streets of Washington, D.C. And I can only think about Kristallnacht, a terrible moment in Germany when Jews across Germany were attacked with the full encouragement of the Nazi Party. So that's what this history says to me today. And even though we are at this moment where the electors are meeting today, and it seems to be a done deal, I think we've just dodged one bullet. It does not say we are done with this threat to democracy yet.
I will say, when I say this to people, that democracies historically last how long?
Well, very, very few democracies have lasted very long until recently. Of course, the United States, well over 230 years now, if we think of from the beginning of constitutional democracy earlier, if we go back to 1776. But most democracies throughout history haven't lasted. In fact, I talk about this in the book, Strongman, the fact that Plato, back in when democracy was born in ancient Greece, said democracy will yield to a dictator or a tyrant. He didn't think it was the best form of government, but he thought it would ultimately end. The men who wrote the Constitution were scholars of that period. They understood democracies, and that's why they wanted to put in what we call these checks and balances to prevent the rise of a strong man. And for 230 plus years, it's worked in America. We've never had a dictator. In our greatest moments of crises, in fact, the Civil War, we got Abraham Lincoln. The next greatest crisis, the Great Depression, and then World War II, we got Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now, both men made mistakes. They were imperfect, they were flawed, they were contradictory in some ways, but they were not dictators, and they ultimately expanded democracy and rights, both in the United States and around the world. At the same time, we got FDR, Italy gets Mussolini, and Germany gets Hitler. That is certainly what makes the United States exceptional. But you're right, around the world, democracy has always been fragile. And we've seen that, as I said, in the wake of the Soviet Union falling, these democracies sprung up, but now they're going backwards in Russia, in Hungary, in Poland, and other countries around the world. So it's a very, very dangerous, perilous time if we believe that democracy is the best form of government.
So when
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aida.
No, what I was going to say was, so I asked you that because when you have conversations and you tell people that our democracy is in danger, we're so indoctrinated to take it for granted, but we're talking about a president who lauds and exalts dictators all over the world. He goes and has secret meetings with them that we're not privy to. I don't understand why people wouldn't think that the natural progression would be for him to attack the democracy and try to turn this country into what the countries of those that he idolizes run. Like I that's why I'm so in awe of the way people react to this, because pick up a book.
Pick up a book is a very good and important idea, that this requires constant civic education. We talk a lot about how schools have been failing. I actually think that the schools right now, and I talk to a lot of teachers and I go into a lot of classrooms, they're doing a better job in some respects than the whole society is. Partly because we are in this social media era, this age when people are getting so much not only bad information, but misinformation, disinformation, conspiracies, outright lies. We understand this, but a great many people believe it. Hitler always talked about the big lie. You keep saying the big lie and people will believe it. Hitler didn't have to convince anybody of what he was speaking to people who already essentially believed what he was saying, but he was giving voice to it in a new way. And giving voice to it in a way that they all followed and cheered. That's why I say democracy, the Washington Post likes to say democracy dies in darkness. It doesn't. It dies in broad daylight, usually while thousands, if not millions of people are cheering. So
74 million
we
people
have to really be on guard, because democracy has not been something that we've spent a lot of time working on in this country. In fact, most of the great progress in this country towards more democracy has usually come from people who have no vote, but they have a voice. First of all, Black people who struggled for abolition, women who struggled for the suffrage movement, later on, people who struggled for the civil rights movement, even those who couldn't vote, like John Lewis when he was a teenager. But they struggled because they knew they didn't have a vote, but they had a voice. And it's really, really easy for those votes to just disappear. I write in Strong Man about some of the techniques that these powerful autocratic dictators use. They attack the press. They want to attack the press because the press becomes the opposition, the enemy of the people. And we've heard that, certainly. They want to fill the courts with loyalists. We've certainly seen that in this country. They attack the electoral system. They try and get the electoral system to suit their needs. We've seen that happening. The use of propaganda. Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, all the men I write about in this book understood propaganda so well, and it formed the basis of what they did. And finally, they create a cult of personality that, I am the leader. I'm the only one who can fix this. You must trust me. If you want to make the nation great again, believe in me. And millions of people in these countries and in this country are willing to go along with that. It's a very, very real and dangerous piece of history, and we should really understand it.
So at this point, and we have to go to a break. So this is my last question. This is a republic, right? This democracy is fragile, but it's a republic. Make that distinction for people, and why does that matter?
Okay, I think it's, for a lot of people, it's a distinction that they like to argue about. It's to me, in a large respect, at least in terms of the United States of America, a distinction without much of a difference, because we are a republic, which means it's a representative democracy, but we couldn't be a republic without democracy. Of course, there are other republics around the world that use the word republic. It means, it's a Latin word that means of the people. Democracy is a Greek word that means power of the people. So in essence, they are similar and related ideas that come from the same place. We're a republic in the sense that we have a representative democracy, and the states all have certain powers under our system of government. It's different in many countries, but most countries today that are democracies are also republics. There's no democracy that's pure. In ancient Greece.
Yeah, but we sit here today watching Electoral College cast votes, and we sit here today understanding that states tried to sue other states, but they got shot down by the Supreme Court because states' rights still preside, right? We live in a country where I can live in New Jersey, Ida can be in California, and no matter what happens federally, we can get an abortion. We can do certain things, even if the federal government says no. Colorado, weed, and across the country, New York, New Jersey just passed it as well. But federally, marijuana is still illegal, but in different states. So it's unique in that way. And it's also unique because it was founded in this hypocrisy where people were already here. They brought people from other places to come here. Then people came from other places, graduated into whiteness, but they weren't quite citizens. The Chinese weren't citizens. We've had this ongoing battle, and it's been, by and large, I'm grateful that it's happening because we've been living a lie as a nation. We weren't founded with these great ideals. It's all a lie that now is laid bare, and it's time for us to decide whether we want to continue. Do you think we're going to continue, Kenneth C. Davis? Do you think it's going to happen?
I do think we're going to continue. I think that it won't continue without a struggle, and it won't continue without a fight. And that's why people say to me, "Oh, if this happens, I'm moving." I'm not going to move. I'm not going to give this country up. My father put a uniform on 75 years ago, and because he thought the country was worth fighting for. And I feel pretty much the same way, that we need to struggle, that we need to make our voices heard. There are three ways you can respond to a situation like this. You can collaborate, go along with it, get on board, jump on the train. You can be a bystander. The bystanders say, well, it's not really affecting me. I got my job, my family's okay, we'll move on. That's the idea that when they're coming for the Jews, they're coming for the communists, they're not coming for me. We talk about that in the book as well. And the last choice is to be an upstander, collaborator, bystander, or upstander. Do we want to have a country that we are willing to stand up for and say, I think this is worth fighting for, and I'm going to continue the struggle? I think so, and that's why I'm speaking out perhaps more loudly now than in the 30 years I've been doing this.
Well, we're going to keep having this conversation with you, Kenneth C. Davis, and I also want to talk next time you come back about this Cold War that we're in. We're still fighting a civil war. I think it's a warm war. I think this weekend proved that we're still fighting a civil war, at least some Americans. And if you don't think you're part of this fight, then you're a bystander. Something's going on. But this book, Strongman, The Rise of Five Dictators and the Fall of Democracy, I hope you don't have to add a sixth to the book. I hope you don't have to add one more in the next edition. But I thank you for being here. I appreciate your work.
Thank you, Karen. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And I know that this is an important subject for you.